History is often told through the glitter of gold and the shimmer of silk. We are taught to see the Silk Road as a bridge of light, a golden thread connecting the East to the West, bringing wisdom, wealth, and wonder to the doorsteps of empires. But the maps in our textbooks are far too clean. They do not show the bleached bones of the thousands who died to bring a single bolt of fabric to Rome. They do not capture the scent of decay that followed the spice caravans. Before the internet, before the steam engine, there was a vast, unforgiving network of dust and blood. This was the first globalization. It made kings into gods and cities into legends, but it was built upon a foundation of human suffering that we have conveniently forgotten. Tonight, we step off the paved paths of history and into the shadows of the Great Silk Road to meet the casualties of the world's first great connection. To understand the Silk Road, you must first understand the scale of the silence. Imagine a world where a letter takes a year to arrive. If the messenger survives the mountain passes of the Pamirs, this wasn't one road. It was a fractured web of shifting dunes, freezing plateaus, and treacherous valleys. For a merchant in Chang'an, the Roman Empire was not a place, but a ghost story. For a senator in Rome, China was a mythical land of Ceres, the Silk People. Between them lay 4,000 miles of the most hostile terrain on Earth. The casualties began here, with the geography itself. The Taklamakan Desert, a name that translates to, "You go in, but you do not come out," became a graveyard for entire civilizations. Caravans of hundreds would vanish into sandstorms that lasted for weeks, leaving behind nothing but the faint ring of camel bells in the wind. These were the first victims, the nameless thousands who died not for a cause, but for the logistics of luxury. Globalization is never driven by a desire for friendship. It is driven by an insatiable hunger for what we do not have. Rome was addicted to silk. It was a fabric so thin and so exotic that it became a moral scandal. Roman critics complained that women were naked in silk, while the empire's gold reserves flowed east in a catastrophic drain of wealth. But every coin that traveled east was soaked in the sweat of the Silk Road's middleman. The Sogdians, the Parthians, and the Kushans, forgotten empires that lived and died by the flow of trade. They were the gatekeepers of the world. In the quiet luxury of their desert palaces, they grew fabulously wealthy, but they lived on a knife's edge. When the trade flowed, they were kings. When a war broke out or a border closed, their entire civilizations collapsed into the dust within a single generation. They were the economic casualties, entire cultures that existed only as long as the demand for silk remained high. The greatest tragedy of the Silk Road was not the bandits, the heat, or the wars. It was something invisible. Along with the silk, the spices, and the glass, the caravans carried passengers they never intended to invite. The Silk Road was the ultimate superhighway for disease. For centuries, isolated populations had developed their own immunities. But as the world connected, those barriers fell. Smallpox, measles, and eventually the Black Death traveled in the saddlebags of merchants. The Antonine Plague, which devastated the Roman Empire and killed millions, is believed to have arrived via the trade routes from the East. Suddenly, the first globalization turned into the first global pandemic. The very routes that brought wealth also brought the end of the world. The casualties were no longer just merchants in the desert. They were mothers, children, and soldiers thousands of miles from the source of the infection. The price of a global economy was paid in the mass graves of the 2nd and 14th centuries. We like to think that connection leads to understanding, but the Silk Road proves otherwise. It was a road built on secrets. The Chinese kept the secret of the silkworm under pain of death. The Romans kept the secret of glass blowing. This was a world of corporate espionage and stolen technology. But when empires fell, the knowledge died with them. The Silk Road is littered with ghost cities, places like Palmyra, Merv, and Dunhuang. Once the most vibrant hubs of human thought, they were abandoned when the trade routes shifted to the sea. The casualties here were intellectual. Great libraries burned, unique languages vanished, and the first attempt at a unified world fractured back into 1,000 isolated pieces. The silence of the desert reclaimed the greatest experiment in human history. As we look at our modern world, connected by fiber optics and shipping containers, we see the reflection of the Silk Road. We share the same hunger for the exotic, the same obsession with luxury, and the same vulnerability to global collapse. The Silk Road was a beautiful, terrifying machine. It showed us that humanity is capable of bridging the impossible. But it also warned us that every connection has a cost. The next time you see the shimmer of expensive fabric or the glint of gold, remember the silence of the Taklamakan. Remember the empires that vanished overnight. Globalization isn't just a story of profit. It is a story of those who are left behind in the dust. The road continues, but the casualties remain buried in the sand.